I know everybody's catching up with friends and all the hometown, but it's 6 o'clock and we want to get started. Thank you. It's really nice to see so many people here in the audience, and I'm sure I haven't gotten a count of how many people are online, but I do know that people are online tonight. I'm Heidi O'Leary. I'm the superintendent of MSAD 75. I'm a graduate of Mount Ararat. If you didn't know that, I grew up in Harpswell, a long history of roots here, and I'm still very happy to be the superintendent and be a part of this decision-making process that we're going to go through. So first, I'd like to introduce, if you will, our school board members that are sitting around the table, and we'll go from left to right.
Andy Began, I'm the facility chair and the rep from Bodenham, board member.
I'm Tony Gonzalez from Topsom.
Amy Spelke from Topsom.
Frank Wright from Harpswell.
Ryan Larson, Harpswell, I'm current board chair.
We have our facilities director. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Good evening, Sean Johansson, Director of Facilities, MSAD 75. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight.
And then Evan.
My name is Evan Howard. I'm the business manager for the district. Thanks.
That's awesome. So welcome, everybody. So really tonight, this is our third community forum. If you haven't had an opportunity, we do have a facilities master plan webpage that you can go on to MSAD 75, and all of the documents, all of the surveys, all of that information. Harriman and Associates has put things out there. Our tech department keeps up with things. So everything that you need is there. If you can't access it, just email me or call me at the office and I will help you to do so. So tonight, we're in our third community forum to talk about our master plan. And this idea really came out of our development of our strategic plan and knowing that our buildings were getting really old and we needed to start looking for the future. I won't be here forever. I'm at the end. I will probably be gone a few more years. We won't say exactly when, but I wanted to dig down deep into this so that the future, everybody would know what's going to happen with our buildings and what they're looking like. Because if you get to 70 plus years, you got to start looking at those buildings. So this is a long-term plan. And again, tonight I'm really pleased to welcome the team from Harriman Associates. This is Stephen Frazier. He's going to be one of the folks talking tonight, and Lisa Sawin, she's as well. So again, we're partnering with them in the development of our district's master plan. They bring extensive facility planning, community engagement, and long-range design. Their team, which has been Lisa and Stephen, has been working very closely with our facilities department. We've taken lots of tours. They've met with principals. They've met with board members. They've come and presented to our facilities committee and then given us lots and lots and lots of information to look at. They're looking at our needs. They're not only looking at our enrollment trends, but they're looking at programmatic needs. And so this evening, what they're going to do is they are going to be guiding our discussion. There will be comment times that you will be able to get up and speak to the microphone, or we'll pass you the microphone. We want to hear your voice. This is really important. They're going to share the findings that we've come up with for the last several times and all of the work that they've done. But really, it's about exploring the options that might be available to us. And then, again, before the district, as we plan for the future of our schools, this is what we're doing. So please join me in welcoming Stephen and Lisa.
Thank you, Heidi. Can you guys hear me okay? Let me get my mic set up here. Good evening. Hold on. Good evening. My name is Lisa Sawin, and I am a principal at Harriman. I lead our pre-K through 12 design studio. So Steve and the rest of our team, we focus solely on pre-K through 12 facilities. And tonight, I'm going to bring you up to speed on where we are at in the process. And I want to emphasize this is a process. It starts with sitting down with the district, understanding the goals of the facility study that they wanted to look at. Then we walked the facilities, we met with principals, we understood programmatic needs, and the options that are being explored are just that. They're options for consideration, and these forums are really our opportunity to engage with the overall community to understand what are the considerations that we need to be aware of as we look at these options. If you were here at the last forum, we went over several of these options. We're going to do a recap so that those that weren't here at the first forum know what they are. At that forum, folks had also given us some ideas to consider. So those options are in here, and then others have come up along the way. We are going to go through those first without costs, get your feedback, and then we will present rough order of magnitude costs on the capital improvement plans as well as the options, and we'll talk about next steps. And as Heidi mentioned, there's a lot of opportunity for feedback tonight for both folks in person and online. There's different polls that we'll do through a website, but also open it up for comment. So I will just echo what Heidi said. Really great to see so many people here. We try really hard to reach out to all the communities to get your feedback. Okay, so we're going to go over the overview of the facility needs, overview of program needs, summary of feedback and questions from the previous forum. So there's a lot of good questions that were asked last time. We have responses to those. We're going to give a review of the revised options with the cost. And then we're going to ask for your feedback first on just the options without the costs, and then your feedback for options with the cost. And then like last time, any considerations, anything that's missing from the list of considerations that we have for each option, or anything that you want to share. So that is what tonight looks like. And I will preface this with there's a lot of information in these slides, so there's going to be a lot of detail. I'm going to try my best to kind of walk you through it, but I do want to warn folks there's a lot of data in here. All right, this is a map of your schools throughout the district. On the left-hand side are the elementaries in yellow. On the right-hand side, you have your middle school, your high school, and other district facilities. And then this is a listing of all of the facilities. And we look at one piece of data. There's a lot of data we look at. We look at age of the facility. And the reason we look at age is just like anything, like our homes, these buildings, there's certain aspects that only last for so long before they need to be replaced or repaired. And so you can see the different ages of the buildings, a couple asterisks because there have been renovations and things like that at some of these buildings. So you can see the average age of those buildings at the bottom. But we use, again, just for a reference point, this is not black and white applies to everything, but as a reference point, the US Department of Education National Center for Education Statistics, in a report they referenced an Ornstein report from 1994, and they summarize that as 20 to 30 years old of a facility, frequent replacement of equipment is needed. Between 30 and 40 years old, the original equipment should have been replaced, including the roof and electrical equipment. After 40 years, a school building begins rapid deterioration. And after 60 years, most schools are abandoned. That last statement, I'm just going to say most, that does not mean all. So that is just their statistic and frame of reference. There are many schools that we all know of that are well beyond that age. So just something to think about as to the age and different timeframes we want to think about these things. All right, here is a color, we call it a heat map. And what this is the facility needs. And we did a walkthrough. Harriman is an architecture and engineering firm. Trying to get this microphone to work. We walked all the buildings with our A&E team, and we assessed the different aspects of each building. And we looked at the condition of those. And so if you see blue, it's an excellent condition. And it's no surprise that this school here, being your newest facility, hasn't aged as much. It has new equipment, things like that. It's in excellent condition. There are a couple things that, want to start to get on the radar for different conditions. As we start to look at some of these other buildings where we start to see red or orange, those are the ones that really are starting to show a lot of wear or a lot of systems past their life expectancy. And so these are the ones that probably need more attention than others. And you start to see those in orange and red, and I'm just going to identify a couple. Williams Cone is one that starts to show a lot of orange and red. We also see a lot of orange and red in Building 376. That's one of the facility buildings. But in regards to schools, we're seeing a lot of orange at Harpswell and some of the others. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But there are, in our report that we'll issue at the end of this, there is detailed recommendations on all of these different aspects of the buildings. And these are just facilities. So what would it look like to essentially address all those facility needs? And we break it down into two chunks. One is what we refer to it as critical. So these are things that you want to address in the very near future, so 0 to 2 years. And we start to look at the cost of those, and these are rough order of magnitude. Here's a range provided up there. And these numbers are based on if you were to do this construction probably in 2027, and we keep that number consistent throughout just to give a comparison. But how we go about this is part of what this master plan is trying to figure out. How do we approach addressing the needs of all of these facilities? So in this, you can see some of the most immediate needs. The highest dollar amount is really at Williams Cone. And then we look at, once we get past those 0 to 2 years, we look at 3 to 10 years. And this is where we start to see a lot of these facilities start to jump up. So in the next 3 to 10 years, the ones that start to climb high on that dollar amount are Woodside Elementary, all the way to the far right. And then in the gray is the Harpswell Community School. Again, just addressing needs from the facility standpoint. Other ones, we saw Williams Cone. A lot of those are in the more near term, but overall you can see that there's also 3 to 10 year in this pink. And then the middle school is behind that. So when we look at them put together, oh, there it goes. The green was the first numbers you looked at. The yellow were the second numbers. And so these are the two combined. So over a total of 10 years, these are the needs that we have identified walking through the schools in the approximate rough order of magnitude to address those needs. So those that were with us in the last forum saw a lot of the options we put forth really looked at addressing Harpswell, Williams Cone, and Woodside because they have the greatest needs right now. And so that's why you see a lot of those options centered around those 3 schools, but then other things folded in various options. And the whole idea of a master plan is to figure out what is the best approach forward for your district. And so is it addressing the CIP, and that's what we do, or is it looking at different approaches to your facility infrastructure to figure out what is the best path forward in the long term? All right, this is another way to look at it. I know I'm a chart person as well as graphic. I'm a very graphic person, so sometimes this helps people to see it this way too, but essentially it's the same data. You have the schools or the buildings on the left, 0 to 2 years in the first column, 3 to 10 years in the second, and then the total on the right. So to look at all of the facilities, again, rough order of magnitude, you're somewhere in the 10.8 to 13 million over the next couple of years. And then over the next, and then 3 to 10 years, that's where you really see that number jump up. And so that's where we really start to think about, are there other ways of addressing this? Do we look at, creating various options to explore how do we solve these needs to address the goals of the overall district and communities? All right, another thing we look at is energy usage. We have this for each of the schools. So on this slide is Bowdoin and Woodside. And what this looks at, it looks at electrical annual consumption. It looks at heating fuel annual consumption and energy use intensity, or what we refer to as EUI. And for those that aren't familiar with what EUI is, it's essentially the miles per gallon for your building. So think of it that way. At the bottom, this is how we kind of start to compare and contrast the different buildings and how efficient they are or not. And so we do it based on energy costs per square foot. There's a caveat though, it depends on what type of fuel you're using. So sometimes we have to look at that a little bit deeper. And sometimes we have to think of, well, how is that building designed to work? Some of the older buildings, some of the systems may not be at the current code, and some of your other buildings may be. Therefore, they're actually requiring more energy to hit different ventilation numbers, or maybe they have AC and another building doesn't. So again, just a data point for us to start to understand where they compare. This is Bodenham, Harpswell, Williams, Cone. At the bottom is really kind of this same information presented, and then you'll have different descriptors on things that you want to make sure people knew as we calculated it. But at the bottom is really what we look at to start to compare initially. And so at Bodenham, we're looking at $1. I should go back because I didn't do this for the last one. At Bowden, we're looking at $1.60 per square foot. Woodside, $1.12 per square foot. Bodenham, $1.47 per square foot. So the higher dollar value, generally you think, oh, it's less efficient. We get to Harpswell, it's $1.68 per square foot. We got to Williams Cone and it was $97 per square foot. And we said, why would that be? It's one of the older buildings. So we started it again a little deeper. And as our engineers were looking at this, we indicated there's no AC at Williams Cone. There is AC at several of these other buildings are partial AC, so that's one of the differences. They have a mechanical system referred to as unit ventilators, which may not be providing as much ventilation as other buildings, which would reduce essentially the heating or the energy cost, that should say. And it has natural gas, which is less expensive than propane. So just things to keep in mind as we start to compare and contrast those numbers. Then we get to Mount Ararat Middle School, we're looking at $1.39 per square foot, and we get to Mount Ararat High School, we're looking at $1.81 per square foot. We understand there are some PVs here, so that when we put in the PV credit, that goes down to 79 cents per square foot. And then adult education, we're at $1.03 per square foot, and the superintendent's office, $1.48 per square foot. So right now we have a bunch of options. The goal at the end of this master plan is really to narrow this down to one or two options we can compare and contrast in even more detail. We will start to use this information to really dial in what type of specific renovations or things do we need to do to address some of these findings. Building 376, $84, and the transportation building is very inefficient at $329 per square foot. All right, something else we look at, enrollment and demographic information. So we work with an organization called NESDEC. They do enrollment projections for several schools throughout New England. They review the district and municipal records. They look at DOE enrollment data, US Census Bureau population trends, state birth rate data, housing sales data. They have conversations with local realtors about HUD trends, and they look at new residential construction starts. And so this really helps us understand the history of enrollment, as well as all the data that impacts future projections for enrollment. When they do enrollment projections, it's really those first 3 years that are the most reliable because that's the data we have for kids that are born. Once we get past that, we're working with different calculations that they use to predict from there. So this is what the report shows us. From 1990 to 2020, the population growth, you can see where that growth occurred. And then the median age, even though there was that growth, the median age has increased between 2000 and 2023, meaning people are aging in place and retiring in the area, reducing the number of children in the school system. You can see per the different areas, what those changes look like. And those are ages, so 36.3 years to 44.6, for example. So then the population trends show a decrease in 0 to 18-year-olds between 2013 and 2023. And you can see the data there for each of the areas. And then town births between 2009 and 2019. And you can see the data there for each of those areas. Last time we were asked, do we have the information per town? We've put the charts in here. In the final report, we will have the full NASDAQ study in that final report so that you have all of that data. And these are the charts for the other towns. So MSAD 75 birth to kindergarten relationship. This is something that's looked at really closely when they do these projections. The district typically enrolls slightly more or the same number of kindergartners than the number of recorded births. So you have a 97% birth to pre-K ratio, which is good. You got people coming here for the schools. Real estate trends. The number of family households increased in Bodenham, but decreased in the other 3 communities. The numbers of persons living along 65 plus has also increased in every community except Bodenham. There are some planned housing projects that will have small impacts on the expected population. And I'll explain that. Sometimes when we see construction, we automatically think, oh, it's going to bring so many children. It really depends on the number of bedrooms that are in those different developments. We know there's exceptions, but generally when we have 3 bedrooms, there's a certain number they use for how many projected students. 2 bedrooms, there's a certain number, and 1 bedroom, there's a different number. We see the most out of 3 bedrooms typically. So the 3-year projection, the total student enrollment is projected to decrease by 169 students, and that's across all grades. And 3-year projection K-5 student enrollment is projected to decrease by 126 students. All right, now we're going to talk about program needs. So this is where we met with every principal in the district after walking the buildings and understanding how they're using their schools right now. Some of the programming themes. So these are themes that we saw throughout various schools. Safety and security was a need to be addressed. We need to improve and provide additional specialist spaces. We need adequately sized program space, specifically the pre-K programs and the arts. Collaboration spaces are needed. I'll pause there for a second. There's been a lot of changes in education since some of these buildings were built and what they were originally built for. We see this across the nation right now. The change in education is really making it so that it's not all the teaching is happening in one space. Students and teachers are breaking out into group spaces to do project-based learning or collaboration or really meeting students where they're at and how they're learning. And there's different spaces that are needed in order to do that, whether that's meeting one-on-one, small group, large group, or being able to peel off and work with others. So that's a lot of where you're seeing that collaboration space come from. Another thing, these last 2 we hear in every school district that we visit. We need more storage and we need more staff restrooms. So there was no surprise to us when we saw that. All right, so then we did this by school. So that was kind of the high level of all of the needs and the themes that we were seeing. And I will say, when we talk about capital improvement projects or capital improvement numbers, those numbers don't address the programmatic needs that require more space. When we start to get into options that look at additions or expansion, this is where we're starting to be able to expand spaces to accommodate some of the programmatic needs here that would require more space, like increasing pre-K or the arts or those collaboration spaces or other things like that. There is some level that we can do in some of the renovations, but a lot of them would need additional space in these buildings or different configurations or approaches altogether, which is where these options really start to come in. All right, Bowdoin Central School, key themes, security features such as intercom, indoor and outdoor, additional cameras, playground fencing. They have insufficient storage and their pre-K classrooms are undersized. Pre-K classrooms are typically 200 square feet larger than a typical classroom. That is because the way that you teach pre-K and kindergarten is it's really station-based. You need a lot more space to do that. Some of the missing programs, storage, and then enrollment. These have been changed since the last form because we just got the October 1 enrollment data from this year. So that's what's reflected at the bottom here is what was reported to the state as of October 1, 2025. And that's a pretty standard kind of snapshot of enrollment that you use is the October 1 dates. Bowdoin Community School, the key themes, adequate space needed for the arts, spaces to support collaboration, commitment to keeping kids on site for special ed programming, and single user and staff restrooms. Missing program spaces, music classroom, must take place in the gym currently. Desire to add pre-K, teacher collaboration space, single user restrooms, staff bathrooms, kitchen with a stove for functional life skills program. And for those that don't know what that is a special education program. And it's where they're teaching a lot of life skills to students. Lack of storage, including for large items like furnitures, stage sets, etc. Insufficient parking on the site. And Harpswell Community School, key themes, larger class sizes may result in insufficient space. Classrooms 1 through 5 are not ADA accessible. Additional space for specialists are needed. And multi-purpose room storage needs. I'm going to pause on the additional space for specialists. This is another thing we see in a lot of schools. There are a lot more specialists in schools today than when a lot of these schools were built. And so you need space for them that is not more of your traditional size classroom. They're usually smaller spaces where they can perform their different services. Williams, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to skip over the missing program spaces. Classrooms 1 through 5 are not ADA accessible. They're accessed by stairs. PT does not have a space, that's physical therapy. Occupational therapy and behavior strategists share a space. Psychologist does not have a designated space when they're on site. The principal office is shared with conference and storage, and the storage room is in the multipurpose space. Williams Cone, key themes, safety and security concerns, storage, lacking staff restrooms and single user restrooms, and they need improved and dedicated specialist space. They're missing programs, dedicated space for speech and OT, quiet room for the older kids. So what that is essentially a place where kids can go and sometimes de-escalate or be in a space to where they can be away from different areas. Maybe they get overstimulated. Appropriate social worker office, single user restrooms, separation of kiln and art room, PE teacher office, which is currently in the storage room, and storage. And then you can see the enrollment, current enrollment as of October 1 at all of those schools, so ranging from 155 to 215 kids. Woodside, we just couldn't fit all the elementaries on one slide, so that's why it's on this slide. Key themes there, additional storage needed, maintenance needs, paint finishes, moisture and fireproofing, drainage issues outside the building, and they are missing a cooking kitchen for special education, separation of server for better space utilization and storage. They have enrollment just over 300. Mount Ararat Middle School, safety and security updates desired, operable walls needed to be replaced, updates to dated finishes and equipment and HVAC issues. And they are missing a functional life skills bathroom, or a bathroom in the functional life skills room. They need a paved ambulance access for the nurse, and the admin conference room is too small to accommodate IEP meetings. They have just over 530 students. And then at Mount Ararat High School, the desire for industrial arts and shop space. There is some, I guess, plumbing odors and issues with the washer and dryer locations, and then traffic backup at the parent drop-off. And the missing program spaces are traditional industrial arts and building/barn for niche electives, and just over 700 students. These are the different adult education, special services, superintendent office, and transportation building. Key themes at the adult ed: updated technology, updated accessible restrooms, additional program space, updated finishes, and generally lack of program space in the facility. And ADA accessibility and single-user gender-neutral bathrooms are needed. Special services, they need improved HVAC, updated restrooms, exterior fencing, lockdown, and feature and PA system desired. And they did not report any missing spaces. Superintendent's office needs better space utilization needed in multiple areas, additional storage needed, more defined assistant spaces, improved signage and wayfinding. And there needs to be reception outside superintendent's office for better utilization of space with photocopiers and improved storage. And last but not least is this transportation building. Garage and site are generally too small. Restrooms are very small, not ADA accessible, need adequate parts storage. Garage lacks exhaust system. And out of the missing spaces, I think the only one that I haven't talked about is garage is generally too shallow to fit the buses and maintain them. All right, so now you have an idea of the general condition of the facilities, where we're at with programmatic themes and needs. So at the last forum, we presented a bunch of options, and then we asked people to give us a bunch of feedback on those options, and a bunch of questions came out from that as well. So generally, this is what we reviewed at the last meeting. You can see the agenda on the left-hand side. And then we asked folks to prioritize the options at that time without cost. And you can see we had about 230 participants. So we kept the poll live after the forum and people could give their feedback. We're gonna have a similar poll tonight to collect another round of data. But generally, the B options, 1, 2, and 3, rose to the top, followed by the C options, and this will make more sense as we go along, and then E2, D1, E1, and D2. Sounds like I'm speaking gibberish. This is the chart of what the options are. And so on the left-hand side, you have we have a key, essentially your existing building. So in the blue is the building, and then the abbreviation for that building is in the circle, and the name of the school below. And if you see green, that means the option considers new construction. If you see in any of these options a gray, that means that option looks at closing that school and putting those students somewhere else in the district, whether it be a new building or a addition renovation somewhere else. Blue is existing school, green is new, addition is the pink. The yellow is renovation. And then at the bottom, you can see how they were prioritized, the numbers, how they were prioritized the last time around. So again, these are all just options. Nobody's saying that any of these are going forward, but there are things to consider. B1 looks at major renovations at those 3 schools that we saw had the greatest need. And then B2 would be major renovations at Bodenham Community School in Harpswell, and then we would remove the cone portion of Williams Cone, redo the front of the site, and construct a new addition at the rear of the property. B3 still has those 2 major renovations, and then construct a new school to replace Williams Cone. C1, major renovations at those same 2 schools. This would look at closing Williams Cone, moving those students to Woodside Elementary and construct a new addition there for that total population. C2 would look at major renovations at Bodenham Community School. It would then take Harpswell Community School population, Williams Cone population, and create an addition at Woodside Elementary for those students. D1 looks at major renovations at Harpswell Community School. It would then take the students from Bodenham Community School, Williams Cone School, and it would construct a new school for that population. We then look at D2, and this would take Bodenham, Harpswell, and Williams Cone and create a new school for that population. E1 looks at Bodenham moves to, let's see, it has an addition at Bowden, and Bodenham students move to that addition. And we close Bodenham. And then there is an addition on Woodside Elementary to receive the Harpswell Community School population and Williams Cone and Woodside. E2 looks at renovations to Harpswell Community School, and then taking the population from Bodenham and putting them into Bowden Central School with an addition, and then closing Williams Cone and moving that population to Woodside with an addition. B1 through E2 were presented at the last forum. At that last forum, we got responses from the exercise we did to consider 2 additional options. So those are represented up here as F1 and F2. And in a minute here, you're going to see an F3 that came out of conversation with the Facility Improvement Committee as we talk through different things. The idea is really to look at all the options, figure out what is the best path forward, and start to consolidate down to a couple options to explore in more detail. So F1 that came forward by a community member was renovations at Bodenham Community School, a major renovation at Bowden, and then taking the population from Harpswell and Williams Cone and adding an addition at Woodside. And F2 is looking at creating an addition at Bowden for the Bodenham population, major renovation at Harpswell, and construct a new school to replace Williams Cone. So when we heard all those letters and numbers, that's what this was referring to. So you can see along the bottom again how they were prioritized last time around. We also asked about priorities and how they would be ranked. We provided 6 different priorities, and this is the feedback we got from the 41 participants in this poll. Safety and security came out as the highest priority. Then energy efficiency, minimize cost impact, maintain the number of existing schools, traffic mitigation, and then reduce the number of existing schools to save costs. So another point of data. So different considerations that were shared through the public comment are on this slide right here. I'm going to leave it up here for people to digest. I'm not going to read through all of these, but this is some feedback that we got. Really good feedback for us to consider as we're moving forward. And then the next couple of slides, there's a bunch of questions that we will provide responses to. One of the things at the bottom here, folks gave us feedback, it's hard to consider options without cost. And we understand that. We wanted to present options first for people to understand what they were before we start to present rough order magnitude costs, but we will present that tonight. And again, this is all available on the website, as well as it's been pushed out in other forums as well. So I'm going to go on to the next slide here. And then here are the questions that came out the last time around. And I'm just going to read through these and tell you what our responses are. And then any additional comments or questions we get tonight, we will make sure that we respond to those and get that information out to people as well. Has there been conversations surrounding what happens to the properties in scenarios where schools close? And so that conversation has not happened at this time, but understand that the towns will have the first right of refusal for that building if those schools are no longer used by the school. As you get into figuring out what your path forward is, that will be a conversation, but that has not happened at this time. And more of a nature of how many options we have on the table. Why does your heat map have an NA across the board for structural stability? How can we consider major renovations, additions on buildings without information on structural stability? So really good question. So a rating of the system cannot be made due to the limited exposed structure. So we can only see so much of the structure. Items included in the facility assessment report are limited to the areas that are observed at the time of the site visit. and the condition of concealed structure is unknown, but we have provided recommended repairs in the report. So you can't necessarily do a full assessment just based on a walkthrough of the structure. As we get into any of these options, we can look at existing drawings and we'll look at how to make additions and renovations. Are there long-term solutions that retain community schools? One of the options, several of them in the B look at that, but then also the newest proposed option that you'll see here in a minute, F3, retains all schools and all communities. B3, why a new site? And this was looking at the replacement of Williams Cone. There are some limitations on that site. In the next slide, we'll walk you through that. I always say nothing is impossible. It all takes money and time and other things to consider. But there are limitations on that site that need to be, we need to be aware of. Is the environmental impact of demolishing those community school buildings and sending that building material to landfills being considered like the high school? We weren't involved in the high school, but our understanding is there's a lot of abatement that happened in the high school, and we believe that's what this is pertaining to. That any abatement that needs to, any schools that have materials that need to be abated will be abated and then addressed appropriately. At the same time, this school was going through that. We were going through something very similar on Edward Little High School. There's a lot of abatement that had to happen there, and that has to be dealt with per different regulations through the state and the EPA. What we have done is we evaluated the existing building in the portfolio for condition and ability to meet educational program needs for the community. Understanding none of the buildings are historically significant, buildings or portions of the building deemed necessary to demolish would need to be abated of all hazardous materials like asbestos and PCBs before any construction debris is recycled or goes to a landfill. Alternatively, some buildings may be closed by the school district and either taken over by the town or sold. If Williams Cone was taken down, couldn't the building be put in the backfield and put the playground in the area of where the cone wing is? And so this is similar to the question about why a new site. If Williams Cone School was taken down, it may fit in the backfield, but the challenge with that site is limited access through the residential neighborhood. If the new school were out back, we would need a large portion of the new front yard for proper bus and parent drop-off along with parking for staff. In an ideal scenario, we would have a second access point to the property on the opposite side. So just things to consider. How does the main major capital school construction program play into moving forward with new builds? So Harpswell was submitted for this 2017-2018 application and placed 51 out of 74 applicants. The Maine Department of Education opens their applications for state funding approximately every 7 years. And it was decided not to apply for the most recent state funding and instead use those funds directly for school improvements. The latest list was released in July 2025, and there were 95 schools now on that list. The state historically funds projects approximately the top 10 ranked schools. So you have applied in the past, you were far down the list, and it was determined by the district that they really wanted to use those funds to improving the buildings because of the placement on the list. If schools are combined, how will the larger spaces be modified to be appropriate for the increase in student population? I'm thinking specifically about the library at Woodside. More space would be needed for books, for book quantities adequate to serve double the students or more. So if Woodside were enlarged, available spaces and proposed programming would all need to be reviewed to ensure adequate space is available in all shared areas like the cafeteria, gymnasium, and library. In some cases, modified schedules can accommodate more students in the same spaces, but in other cases, these spaces simply need to be made larger to support the larger student population. These ideas would all be taken into consideration as design options are developed. All right, so those were the questions that came out last time and the responses. So review of revised options with cost. All right, so same graph you saw before. Now we have F3 on the end. This is another option that came out. And this was proposed by an advisory committee member. And what this looks at is major renovations at Harpswell and Bodenham Community School. And this would close Williams Cone and Woodside and construct a new school in Topsom for the population. Another thing you see added to this chart that wasn't there last time is the white circles. That essentially is that we are addressing CIP at those schools. And so essentially B1 is addressing CIP at all those schools. The CIP includes the renovations at those 3 schools in yellow. And then B2 and on start to really look at the replacement of infrastructure. So whether it be an addition or a new school. So one thing to think about in regards to long-term planning is as you start to look at your infrastructure, you want to start to look at, is there ways to which you want to look at, if it's needed, to start to replace aspects of the building to almost restart the clock on that structure or equipment. So that's where a lot of these options start to come together. Another thing to think about is if there are ways to start to bring schools together, we sometimes see more equity in programming because you can provide the programs at that one school that's serving more students. There's less travel time for specialists if they're going between schools, and there is savings in operation costs. All right, I'm not going to read through all these slides. I'm going to put these up here. What these are is essentially showing you each option and then different considerations for each of these options. So we're going to start with the Bs. And that's a lot of text, but essentially what it is B1. It tells you what it is, and we've kind of already gone over what these options are. Considerations that we initially came up with to start the conversation are in the green. And then considerations that came out of the last forum. So what we did, if you weren't here, is we had big keynotes for each of the options. We asked everyone to get Post-it notes and give us their considerations. That's what you're seeing in yellow. So this is the data that we're collecting on different considerations that we've heard from the community. The programmatic needs, essentially, depending on the option, we're really not addressing programmatic needs with additional, that require additional space at B1. We start to look at some of those in B2 and B3 as we start to replace aspects of the building and can create more space for those. But generally, in summary, B1 is really the capital improvement, addressing all that stuff you saw on the charts. And then B2 is the same, but replacing the cone portion of Williams Cone. B3 is those 2 renovations, the one to Bodenham, one to Harpswell, and then rebuilding Williams Cone building or school. Steve, anything you would point out on any of these options? Okay. All right, options C1 and C2. This is where we have the major renovations at Bodenham and Harpswell, and we construct that new addition at Woodside, and we close William Cone. You can see the different considerations again we initially came up with in the green, and then items that were added due to feedback from the community forum last time around. This starts to address more programmatic needs throughout the district. D1, D2. D1, we renovate Harpswell and construct one new school, and we close Bodenham and Williams Cone. And then D2 is construct one new school and close Bodenham, Harpswell, and William Cone. And again, you can see the considerations and the feedback that we were given. And we don't mean for that text to be so small, but there was a lot of feedback on that option. So I apologize if you can't read that. And then option E1 and E2. E1, move Bodenham to the addition at Bowden. move Harpswell and Williams Cone to an addition at Woodside, close Bodenham, Harpswell, and William Cone. E2, move Bodenham to an addition at Bowden, move Williams Cone to an addition at Woodside, major renovations at Harpswell, and close Bodenham and Williams Cone. And as we go up in the letters, we're starting again to address more of the programmatic needs with these options. So we didn't have feedback for these options because they are new since the last forum. There will be opportunity today for you to give us feedback, anything that isn't already up on for these options, as well as these new options. But again, the summary for F1, renovate Bodenham, provide an addition at Woodside, and close Williams Cone. And close the Harpswell School. And then option F2, build a new Williams Cone School, construct an addition at Bowden, major renovations at Harpswell, and close Bodenham. And then F3, build a new school in Topsom, major renovations at Bodenham and Harpswell, and close Woodside and Williams Cone. I will say and then the considerations on that one, this maintains local schools in each of the 4 communities and avoids the cost to address serious envelope issues at Woodside. It would be built on neighboring land to Williams Cone if they could acquire it. So we're already starting to kind of look at how might we be able to implement this. All right, so here's the rough order magnitude. Cost for the options. So when I say this, I'm going to break the cost down into 3 segments. There's the option as to the renovation, expansion, or new build, and that's what this is. Then you're going to see a cost with the CIP for those buildings that are not in these options, but still need to be addressed in the 10 years. And then we're going to show you the total. So I'm going to let everyone pause and let the sticker shock set in because I know it's a lot of money. Again, trying to put numbers to things so we can start to understand what is the best path forward. So we give a range. Again, these are rough order magnitude costs. So that major renovations to those 3 schools, we're looking somewhere between the 34 and 41 million. And you can pretty much see the cost for those different options in bold at the bottom. And looking at just the options again themselves. And this is for the Bs, the Cs, and the D1. I'll pause here for just another couple seconds for folks to take a look before I move to the next slide. So then we have D2, the Es, and the Fs. No, it's not supposed to be on there. Oops. That was a direct copy from the option as we received it from a community member, and we had taken that off. I apologize for the error. So D, E, and F1, F2, and F3. So this is the chart with B1 through F3, kind of summarizing everything for the different schools that are impacted by the option and the total cost. Again, this is just for those major renovations and additions. Now we look at the CIP. So for B1 through F3 on the left column, you have estimated total rough order magnitude cost for the option. And then we have the CIP for Bowden and Woodside for all of the options except F3 because it's addressed as part of that option. The CIP for Bowden, except for at F3 for the same reasons, it's not applied there. The middle school and high school CIP, all options, and then the superintendent, adult ed, special ed, transportation.
Lisa, could you just repeat what CIP means? That you've gone through a lot of info, and just for anybody that's curious.
Absolutely. So CIP is capital improvement projects. Yep. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, a lot of data. I hope it provides you kind of a context of what we're looking at, what we're trying to collect to inform the different options and really provide data so that you guys can make the best decision moving forward for your district. What we want to do right now is a poll of the options that we presented. And so if you have a smartphone or a laptop, this is going to be a web-based poll. Works well for folks that are in person, but also those that are remote. And so again, these are the options. I'm just going to let this set in before I move to the next slide with the poll so folks can remember what they are. And when this poll comes up, yeah, if you want to take a picture of that, if it's helpful to reference, please do. When this poll comes up, it will ask you based on the letter, so B1, B2, so on and so forth. And it's going to ask you to prioritize all of them. So the first one you pick is your highest priority. The last one you pick is your lowest. And you do need to prioritize all of them for it to register. But you can pick them in order or you can slide them to the top. Did you have a question? Yeah. Last time we left it up, I think for a week. Yeah, so we'll keep it up for a while. Yep. That's how we got 230 responses last time. Yeah. And is this related to the poll? Yep. We're using the best tools we have available. If people want to email their responses in, they can do that, or they can call the district. Okay, I'm going to move on to the poll. Here is the QR code, and here is the website. I'd have to turn that over to the district. We're just providing the data. Can you repeat the question?
Could there be another method besides responding to this questionnaire on paper or instead of anything online? Because I'm considering our older citizens.
So I'm just going to repeat what was said. They will look at it. They don't know what the method would be right now, but it is something they'll look at, another way to reach out to folks. Yep. So we, I think it filled up with the number of folks that could reply. So we've now expanded it beyond that. So that was the glitch. This here? Okay. Oh,
I think that if I can just jump in real quick, I think that the point that more time to consume this information and in future, more avenues to share the information has been noted and heard. And I think that we'll continue to do better in the future and understand that there is some frustration with that. So thank you for sharing that. We welcome any feedback and thoughts on the best way. I've heard some really good ones tonight. So please keep that information coming and we will endeavor to ensure we get you the information the best we can.
Is there any way that we can have access to these slides that we just saw? In particular, the number of students, population at the specific schools? If you could bring that back up so I could take a picture of it?
yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back for just a second. So anyone that's looking at this QR code, it's going to disappear. We'll come back. Appreciate the feedback, and we'll definitely take that in consideration with the Facility Improvement Committee as we move forward in the process. I do want to say that all of this will remain open and online so that you can review it later, but we have taken that feedback into consideration. Thank you. Did you want to go to the next slide here? I just want to make sure she got the enrollment.
I just have one question
Yep.
and this might be a school board question, but has the school board gave their major priority for what is most important to them of all these needs? So as citizens, we're looking at that, and has anybody assessed what is most important to make a movement on quickly?
Are you actually which course forward? Are you asking which like maintenance issue or problem? I don't think that we have gotten to that point at all. And I'll speak briefly here as the chair, and please, somebody else feel free to correct me. But really, this is information gathering. We're trying to share the information. It sounds like we could do better, and we will do that to help inform the thinking as we go forward. But we have a long ways to go before I think we reach those points. And we're just trying to get the information and thinking together at this time. Kim. You know, I just want to make sure everybody online gets to hear you, Kim.
Kim Totten from Bowdoin. I spent 18 years on the school board. I was involved in when we closed the West Harpswell School, which was not an easy decision. Back then, I had people come up to me and say, well, what's going to happen if the population decreases? You're going to close the Harpswell Islands too. And I'll tell you now what I said then. Every single community needs to have their own elementary school. It is a reflection of the community members. That's where they learn about their community. That's the interaction with their community. And they bring that community's culture to the middle school with them so that we join all four towns at that point. I cannot even believe that we're looking at closing Bowdenham or West Harpswell Islands, because they're all very different towns. You're not going to bus kids from Harpswell to Topsom. That's ridiculous. It's bad enough we do it for the middle school and the elementary school, middle school and high school. And I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. when I was on the board, when we had community public forums, we made sure these started at 6:30 at night, so people had time to get home from work and to be able to get to the meetings. And the other thing we did is we respected the other meetings going on in our 4 towns, and we looked at when our selectmen's meetings were. The Monday night meetings, the Bowdoin Selectmen, there's 3 on that board. They meet every Monday. So it's impossible to get their town input at these meetings when you have them. You also have the Region 10 board meeting tonight. So you can't have everybody being represented. You need to think about that. You need to think about what else is going on in our towns. This affects the towns in a huge way. And I will not support anything that closes a community school. If Topsom decides they're okay with closing the school and combining them, that's their issue. But I know when going to each school, when I was a school board member, even the 2 Topsom schools had very different cultures and were very different schools. So you need to think about that. It's not about the money. It's about what's right for those kids and what they're going to bring to the middle school and high school when they get here.
And I echo everything Kim just said. Tyler Washburn, Oars Island. I also was a chair of the school board, and I was also a student representative when we closed the West Harpswell School. I don't think it is lost on me that the last time a school was closed in Harpswell, we stayed in the district by the skin of our teeth. I am a huge advocate for SAD 75, and I think one of our long-term strengths has been our presence in each of the 4 communities. I think before anybody goes down the rabbit hole of potentially closing the Harpswell School, I mean, that's a hypothetical idea. It's not a hypothetical idea, it's a bad idea. Invest in the schools and be careful with what happens. If you close a school in Harpswell, there's a lot of money that could leave this district, and I don't want to see that happen. But you close this school, I'll be the first one to sign the petition.
Matt Gilly, I'm one of the selectmen from Harpswell. I've seen a lot of data presented here, but we seem to be missing a massive data point completely in this whole discussion, and it's what this whole discussion is about, is the well-being of our students. Have we examined how any of these options are going to affect the well-being of the students or improve test scores or improve their education opportunities? All I'm seeing is cost and infrastructure problems, but I'm not seeing anything referencing getting our kids a better education. Has that been taken into account at all in with these options, or is it just more cost-based?
Heidi was saying that's part of the strategic plan.
Do we want to keep going with more comments at this point? Do you want to?
Comments, and then I want to get to the other polls, but it's giving people the time to respond to this here, which is good.
Dorian Taylor, Oars Island. Over the years, I've been involved with many school closings, the Archdiocese of Boston, of Worcester, dealt with Fitchburg, a bunch of states in Massachusetts. My heavy recommendation is renovation of all the buildings. I've seen the consequences of closing buildings. I've seen the consequences of actually trying to combine buildings. And it's good on paper, but it's lousy as far as people's morale. Thank you very much, morale. It was a tough, like I said, when I had to go through all the archdiocese and close all the 400 schools, and pick and choose which ones stayed open, which ones closed. That was pretty tough to do to begin with. And then I saw the after effects, what happened when you actually did it. And there were certain communities that were devastated. And there were certain people who stopped going to the school as well, just because they just couldn't afford to do it or to get over there anymore. So I agree with you all. It's not an easy decision to make. It has to be done very carefully. And these schools also serve more than a purpose of just the students. They also serve, well, in Harpswell, we use the gym for a lot of our meetings and voting. Same thing with the other schools, I'm sure. So it's not just about the students, it's about the community as well. And I said, I'd rather spend the money to renovate the schools and keep the communities as whole than try to start closing them down and move people around. That's just going to, it's going to cause a lot more grief. Basically comes down to, you're going to pay one way or the other, whether it be in money or whether it be in people's sanity. I mean, that's basically what it's going to come down to.
Is there a way to quantify the unintended consequences of closing a school? I mean that as an honest question, because there's a lot of data that we've analyzed that is easier to look at because there's a cost-benefit analysis and it's finances. But when we're measuring the demographics of a community and environmental inputs and the enrichment that communities bring to these schools, like different partners within the community, the rec departments, the land trusts, the volunteers that come in, the older members of a community who use those schools as a community center. There must be a way to measure that. There must be a way to quantify it so we can balance it against what the numbers say.
Hi, I have a very basic question, and pardon my ignorance. When it comes down to kind of making the decision, how does that get voted on? Is it district? Is it school board? Is it the people in this room? Is it the people that have access to computers? Because I guess a lot of us are kind of confused about how the actual decision will be made in the end.
So I'll just comment on the process that essentially we're going through. We make no decisions. We provide data to the committee that asked us to do the study. And then from there, my understanding is there's a recommendation that's made to the school board, and then the school board determines what to do with it from there. Yeah, that's a good point. So Heidi asked me to just mention timeline. Any of these options, if you were to move forward with any of them, are not happening tomorrow. I'll just give in context. I know it's completely different for all the options. If you were to build a new school, from the time that you essentially say, okay, here's what we're gonna do, to the time of occupancy, general rule of thumb, 5 years. So just keeping that in context once you figure out what you're doing. New school renovation, expansion generally can be about the same. It all depends on the amount of work that would happen, but it's going to take time to understand what option you're moving forward with as well. And I do want to say we really appreciate all the feedback. This is what we need to hear from the community. Where are those points of disinterest in some of these options? Where are some of the interest in some of these options? This ultimately, whatever you move forward with needs to be the best solution for the overall school district and the communities. So we take the approach of exploring all options so that we can really tease out what are the best options. With that said, we're just gonna, we have one more comment? Okay.
So Allison Hawks, Harpswell. I'm usually plenty loud enough, but on that unintended consequences, Harpswell is probably a little bit unique, and I think Linda brought it up in that we have an aging population. If Harpswell School is on the chopping block at all, this will decimate Harpswell. We will have no youth and young families coming to Harpswell at all. We're already going down because our property values are so high and the youth cannot afford to live in Harpswell. And if you take away the only thing that probably attracts young families to Harpswell, you are going to completely change the demographic of what is around here. And you're going to see probably even lower numbers than you're guesstimating on up there.
I just wanted to add one step to the process question. Whatever the school board decides, you can see by these numbers, it's going to require a bond, and that will go to the voters.
Okay, we're gonna come back to comments. I promise there'll be more time. I want to move forward with some of the polls. That was really helpful to allow people to give us feedback. We've seen kind of a decrease in participation right now. We'll keep this live. Heidi will push this out so that folks have access to this, and it will stay open. Last time, I think it capped out at 230. We have expanded the ability to have I think it's endless number of respondents. So please share this with folks. And then again, also reach out to the district with any feedback. But what you're seeing in this poll from those that are here, as well as those that are online, are very similar sentiments to what we've heard in the comments. So again, the Bs essentially are really the renovation or replacement of existing schools. So that maintains those schools within those areas. And then we have C1 behind that, and then F3 and F2. And then so on and so forth down the list. I'll just scroll down so people can see the data. Again, this is just the snapshot right now. You can see it actively updating. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the next one. All right, so what we want to know is with adding, so this is again looking at what you prioritized last time in comparison. So public feedback poll prioritizing the updated options with cost. So very similar poll. We are now going to have the cost at the bottom as well as in the poll, so you can see that. See if that has any impact on the prioritization or not. Again, just helps us understand. While people are filling this out, I'll just ask that you go around and do any more public comment at that time, if there are any. It seems like a good way to be able to do that. If folks want to take a picture of this, so you have it, I will switch back to it after I have the poll up for a little bit, but hopefully that's helpful. But we did hear the feedback to have printouts next time. And then the poll is going to operate the same way. When I switch to the next slide, I'm just going to wait for folks. I can see lots of folks are taking pictures of this now. Yeah.
This is for the folks that are online. If you have a comment or a question, if you could put it in the chat, we'll screenshot it and make sure that we get answers to those questions for you. I did notice that there were some hands raised, but we aren't able to open that up at this time. So if you put it in the chat, we will screenshot it. And Martha, I see your hand. We will, if you could put your question in the chat or a comment, we will get those.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide here. Oops, sorry. So essentially what this is showing is option only cost on this slide. So that was the picture you just took. I should have said this before you took your pictures. This is the CIP only cost. And then this is option and CIP total. So this is really everything. So CIP happening at the white ones, different colors are the option. So you can see the total of option and CIP. We were trying to figure out how to get all that information on one slide.
And real quick, I'll just jump in for anybody at home. I believe the chat is actually disabled potentially in our meeting.
I don't know.
I have it open and it looks like it's disabled. So if that's the case and you're at home and you're getting a little frustrated, I'm the board chair, Ryan Larson. You can email me or call me. The information's online. If you want to send me your question, I'll make sure it gets to the right place. The email is Larson, L-A-R-S-E-N-R, @link75.org. And that's all on the website. And apologies for any confusion there.
And I will say, I think we got quite a few questions through email last time that we added in. All right, I am now going to switch over to the poll. Here is the poll. So here's the QR code. Here is the website with the number. Same idea. Put your highest priority or highest ranked option first, second, third, so on and so forth. And then I know that there's some public comment. So while folks are filling this out, we'd love to hear from folks. Go ahead.
Hi, I won't yell this time. I'm Linda Hall. I'm from Harpswell, and I was on the school board for 12 years. I have a more general question. As people have brought up tonight, these decisions affect the individual communities quite a bit. What are your plans for reaching out to the individual communities more than a forum here in Topsom? Do you plan to go out to each community as you do or you used to do for budget presentations so people could understand what was going on? Is that part of the process?
I guess I didn't. No, I think The question was, is there a plan to go out to all the communities to provide this information? Is that the question?
Sorry, and to get feedback.
Feedback,
from
yep.
communities. 'cause
Okay, I just wanted to make
not
sure.
Small sampling here
So,
tonight.
yeah,
Absolutely.
let me kind of go through the process of where this started. We engaged with Harriman just a little bit of time ago, and they've been coming to our facilities meetings, which we have pretty much monthly. And we decided we would hold several community forums, and we're really at the very, very beginning stages of all of this. This is like the initial, let's get this out there, let's see how it reacts. At our next facilities meeting, we'll begin to plan what's the next step. Let's look at everything. No decisions have been made. Nobody's closing schools today or tomorrow. Again, I know it's very, when you look at it this way, it's hard to look at. First time we've done it in this district, and it's a new process, a new learning process. But we will go out into communities. We'll work just like we do with the finance committee, and we'll hold information nights and gather information at our different schools, but we'll also talk about different ways we can get things out there. How we've gotten things out there is through our website. I've emailed and I've done press releases for all of the community forums. We work with different local news organizations, local papers. I'm communicating with them. If there's another way to do it, we'll look at that and we'll get more information. So the purpose of this is really for community input. We as a group aren't just going to make the decision alone. We are taking all of this in and we will collect the data and then we'll look at it. This is a long-term plan. It's not overnight. And I just want people to realize that 5 to 7 years, we will hopefully figure out where we're going to be going before that. Okay, so I will work really hard to make sure that more people, more different channels, different ways that you get this information. All of the information right now, anything that we talk about, videos, is all online. And I do understand that some people don't have access to the internet and, something to think about in a different way. We'll have to plan how we're going to do that. I don't know the answer to that right off the top of my head tonight.
So I just want to say, if you add the amount of kids in Williams Code to the Woodside and Harpswell, if you add that amount of kids to Woodside, that would be a lot of kids at that one school, even with adding an addition. That would still be just like a lot of kids at that school.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I go over here? All right, thanks. Yeah, I agree with most of the points that have been made. Just a process point. I'm Ian McConnell from Bodenham. I just have a hard time voting on the options that affect other towns. I've never been to the Harpswell School. I've never been to the Topsom schools, and I really feel like it should be put to those communities in terms of how they want to manage those schools. It's hard to imagine being a Harpswell parent or grandparent, imagine your kindergartner having like an hour school ride or having bought a home in a town and expecting to have like a community school for that and not be available. But and in Topsom, I don't know if I would want my child going to a 500-person elementary school. But again, those are just my opinions, so I would love to see those left to those community members. For Bodenham, it's a little hard for me to understand why closure is even being considered, because when you look at the data, the school is actually quite in good shape on your heat map. The costs over the next 10 years actually aren't much higher than the Bowdoin Central School or Woodside. So it's not totally clear to me why that's even being considered. Thank you.
I just kind of realized something, and I've been up since 2:30, so I apologize. But you guys are talking 5 to 7 years. That means all these options, you're talking about doing it without state funding. You're looking at building a school without going through the process. None of those are feasible with the way our rates are going up right now and with our tax dollars the way they are right now. If something don't change in the state, none of those options are feasible. And I want people to understand that this is a big waste of time If we're not planning on applying for state funding for any new school or going through the whole process, and your 5 to 7 years is not even possible going through the state funding. So that just like made me not even want to listen anymore. I'm sorry, but you look at those numbers, all on the taxpayer dollars for these 4 towns without any state funding. I know it's all our state money, but it goes through a different process. That's ridiculous.
I'll go one more here and then I'll come, there's a couple of people.
So that just made me get to thinking as well, and since I can't see up there, I can't see if it's up there, but does that mean the costs that are up there are not going to be a relevant cost in 5 years? So these costs that you've given us are costs, today costs?
I'm sorry, who's speaking? Thank you. So these costs are essentially, we have escalated them to 2027. And so depending on which option you move forward with and when you move it forward, they will need to be escalated depending on what they are. So we have done them all in 2027.
So have you calculated it all? So you said 5 years, that's 2027, isn't 5
I only
years.
used 5 years as a point of reference so that people understood how long projects can take. That's the only reason I used 5 years.
So do you do any calculation in adding a percentage of what you think the costs are going to be? So like we have even, is it going to be 20% more? Are you taking a guess? I mean, because these aren't going to be real numbers in 5 years also, so it's.
So again, we're trying to understand which of these options we want to drill down to. So we try to narrow it down to 1 to 2 so we can start to get into the more granular at that time. We would then look at what would be the plan to implement it over time or immediate, whatever option it is and whatever process. And then we would apply escalation depending on when that would happen. So we're trying to compare them apples to apples based on one point in time. So unless we had detailed plans for all of these options at various different implementations, we're just trying to give you a snapshot in comparison to each other based on the same dollar amount, and this is how they compare. The other question I think Heidi was saying in regards to the state funding, this is actually part of the process for applying for state funding. You need to do studies and understand what options you're considering as you move forward. So this would set you up well for the next application process as well if you are applying for that.
I'm Joe Moore from Orr's Island, Harpswell. Just an observation. K-12 public education, especially in rural areas in this country, the history of it is increasing centralization, the loss of local schools. And you can look at it in especially the northern New England states of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. What's interesting here is that the finances, as you look at the slide that's up there, the one that preserves the local schools seems to be the least expensive. And I realize the numbers have a long way to go. And what's going on is the cost-benefit equation shifted from regional high schools, instead of each town having its own high school. The regional high schools, which really happened in the 60s and 70s, they ended up being more financially efficient. Many of the towns resented for generations the loss, or a couple of generations, the loss of the local high school. When it goes down to the elementary schools, that gets more at the life of the community. And the reason I say that is where my wife and I lived in Vermont when our kids were little. Our best friends were the parents of the school that our kids went to. We're retired now. They remain our best friends. That's what made up our community in Vermont, is those relationships. And we met at the schools. And so I think there's a shift going on in rural America right now where the combination of the finances and being careful with the finances, but preserving the school is the key to the quality of life in the town. And I appreciate what a number of even the school board members have said tonight. But I just want to note that I'll be interested to see how this process plays out, because the finances may actually support that notion.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Hanner. I'm a resident of Bodenham. I've lived there for 11 years. I'm 46, so neither young nor old. I have a 2-year-old. It's well past her bedtime, and the only reason I'm able to be at this meeting, although I understand there was a Zoom option, I'll address that in a moment, is because my partner is home with her. So I did actually start streaming this on Zoom on my drive down from Bodenham because I could not find the slide deck or other relevant material for the meeting online. Was that available prior to the meeting? And I maybe missed it.
So this presentation, Heidi said, is on the website.
Thank you. I just guess I would suggest in the future that meeting materials are actually associated with the meeting. It's like the Zoom link was available. I had no idea where to look for it. I looked, like I said, I'm neither old nor young, but I couldn't find it. And my other question is more about, you mentioned 230. Was that a cutoff that was specific?
No, it was
for
just the software's
responses?
capability, and so we have now increased the capacity as to the software polling, so it was not intentional.
I'm really glad to hear that, because as I'm learning and understanding the number of towns and people affected by that, and considering the number of residents that are probably in each of those towns, I think 230 as a response rate really indicates that this is not saturating the towns that we're in, that people are not aware of this conversation, or if they are, how to be participating in it.
Hi, I'm Tiffany Alexander. I'm from Harpswell. I actually have a 2 and a 4-year-old, so my son will be starting kindergarten next year. So I can also say that I think from a lot of angles, thinking from someone who would be new and coming to this district, the idea of starting at a school and having it be somewhere else later is pretty kind of scary. Even if it's not Harpswell, it could be somewhere else. And I think I'm pretty online, and I did not really know about this. I got this secondhand from someone else coming from the town. And looking at it, and even some of the numbers from the original slides for even enrollment is different this time than it was before, which is a correction, which is great.
Yep.
But if that was the first time you looked at it and you're like, well, the data's wrong, it just kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of pieces to it that feel kind of hard to navigate, I guess. And I'm a teacher myself, and I think I'm hoping teachers know about this too, like the educators, and thinking about, like, I was reading your strategic plan for the district, which is great, but like as teachers, this is also like, again, these are the unintended consequences of these discussions too, if they're not really, really thought out and really thorough of what that could do to them. That just whole idea of, I want to work in a small school. Okay, but I have to go work in a big school, and what that could look like as well. I don't know, just yeah, making sure that communication piece. And I'm having a hard time wrapping my brain around the why. Like, is this a money thing? Are we spending too much per kid? Like, what's leading us down this? Like, can't we just fix what we need to fix and move on? Or do we, I mean, I get there's things we have to do, but that's the goal, and the why is kind of, I'm missing it, I think.
Yeah, so I'll just speak to that real quick. So the why is looking at your aging infrastructure, and some of these options look just at that, fixing what you have. And so that's what some of these options explore, and some of the other options look at different approaches. So just to answer that piece, yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next poll. Summarize this real quick. We'll open it up for additional comments afterwards if there are any. And you can always email or call the district if something rises to the top. But we really appreciate all the feedback on the communication. If you have ideas of different places that the district can get the word out, please send them in. Our goal is to get this out. We just need to understand other places that we can send it. So this poll, pretty much cost had very little impact, if none, on this. So you can see there's still a strong preference for those B options, which really looks at addressing the needs at the schools that you have. And then C and F start to look at different approaches to that. Again, we'll keep this poll open. And then this is public engagement. So this is just a way to submit, submit any comments on any of the options that you have. It's anonymous if you don't want to email or things like that, just another way to give feedback to the district on the different options and the different, I've heard unintentional consequences. If there's things you want to tell us about, by all means, put that up there. Anything that you think hasn't been looked at, any additional options that you want to explore. Again, this is, we're really trying to get feedback from different community members. And like Heidi said, we're going to brainstorm on different ways to get out to more folks, but appreciate all of your input in that as well. So I'll just let this run here to be able to provide the feedback. If there are still folks that want to speak, we can come around with the mic. Otherwise, I believe that is mostly the end of our presentation. We have some next steps. I'll go back to that in a minute. We're going to review the community feedback. We're going to work with the facilities committee to eventually make a recommendation. And then we will conclude the master plan, but we still have a lot to work to do in the meantime. So we'll continue to get that communication out to folks. And find ways to make sure everybody has access to it. So thank you all for those that came out tonight in person. Thank you to those that are online, and please continue to stay engaged. We have a comment. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say that I'm sorry that you are getting, you've come to do a presentation, and I appreciate all the work that you've done with it. I think what you're feeling here is not the frustration for the work you've done. You've done your job. It's the frustration in the fact that the board has not done its job in reaching the community and in framing this in a different way. When you're putting things out about closing schools and it makes the news and it goes out and that's what the sounding is, that's where the problem is. It's the communication. So I appreciate the work you did, and I'm sorry if you're getting the brunt of it during your presentation. But I just think that having this presentation to a group of people, and if you would have gone through all your slides without anybody talking, we wouldn't have had much time to have a discussion. And so we kind of ran over your time, and I apologize, but people are going to continue to get frustrated until the communication gets better.
No, I appreciate that. And the goal of this is to get that feedback. So I appreciate the sentiments there, but this is really intended to have that public comment. So go ahead. Is there another comment?
Yeah, on that is that this isn't rocket science. I mean, there's a very easy way to communicate with everyone in the district, and that's to send a flyer out or an insert in so that everyone has the information. I don't know why this is so difficult, and this is supposed to be our educator, so I don't know why we can't be more versatile and why we're at this kind of standstill with communication. So yes, the district needs to do a much better job. It hasn't done a great job in a lot of years. I used to serve on this board as well, so I do know. Do better, please, because this is a very important decision that affects a lot of kids and affects the way we live for decades. So please, this is important. This is very important.
Yeah, I'm just going to quickly say, I was on that committee when we had to close the West Harpswell School. It was no picnic. It turned the town upside down, one side against the other, where regardless of whether or not there was a bridge, bridging the two sides of the town together, it didn't work. I am thankful that the children got to recognize that it's okay if I went to another school because I'm still in the town. The town still has a school and I'm getting the education that I need. And this town, the Harpswell town, Harpswell is very proud of its school, as is all the towns in the district. We need the same treatment everywhere. And again, the communication needs to get better.
All right, any other, oh, there's another comment over here.
Hi, Howard Marshall from Harpswell. I just wanted to say that I think that having all of these options up there is good because even though many of us don't like the idea of closing the schools, it's good to have all of the possibilities to compare them and look at them and say, okay, it's only costing us a little bit more to keep the school open. That's a good idea. Or there's a way that we could have, eliminating, just saying we're not going to look at the possibility of closing the schools is just ignoring information that could be useful. The other thing I want to say, though, is that I found that the dozen options totally mind-numbing, and I think it would help if there was some sort of summary of them as groups and what there is between the different types of options, because it was just a fire hose of information that I'm looking at it in different colored circles, and I have no idea how to compare them.
Thank you for that feedback. We'll look at ways to organize that.
While I recognize it's good to have all the facts on the table, I do think there are some bad options, and closing a school is a bad option, and I hope we can get past that pretty quick, because it's time that if these problems have been festering, let's invest in schools and get it done. But the idea that all the ideas have merit, I just don't believe closing the Harpswell School, the Bodenham School, or any of them really has merit when we can fix our schools and invest in it and keep a sense of community.
Thank you. Any other comments? We got one more over here. And thank you for all those that are entering your comments online. Like we did last time, we'll review all of these with the Facility Improvement Committee and address those. Go ahead.
Hi, my name's Monique. I graduated from Mount Ararat High School. I have 2 kids at Williams Cone. I'm also a longtime educator, and the idea of taking kids in Harpswell and sticking them on a bus and driving them all the way to Topsom every day, those poor like kindergarten and first grade kids that have small bladders, and the idea that they could be on a bus for an hour doesn't sit well with me, even though that's not my community, that's not my community school. I see where they're coming from. I also see where these schools aren't just the schools. They're the places people are going to vote. They're the places where your kids are going to basketball practice. If you're closing some of these schools, where are the Parks and Rec programming going to happen? Where the Parks and Rec programs hold a summer camp or sports practices and games, where are those going to go if those schools are closed?
Thank you. And we are taking notes of all these comments too, so we can look at those as well. Any other comments?
If I can make a quick comment.
Absolutely.
To wrap up, Lisa, I would just like to say, as the chair, thank you guys for coming tonight. The intent of this process is to drive this discussion and have this discussion. Could we have done better and maybe triggered it or got it going sooner? Yes, we'll own that and we'll look to do better in the future. But the goal of this process is to have this discussion. So this is exactly what we need to be doing, hearing from everybody, ensuring that we're representing the values of the community. These discussions help with that. So thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you for sharing your opinions. We really do appreciate it.